by the way, not just the tribe of Judah, but the woman who is pregnant, and you ask the husband, hey, did you lie with her? And he says no, and you know she's not a harlot, she's by God, then that's the one. And you're like, the one of what? The one that he talked about with the king, that one. That's him. So that's what I'd be saying. But now is the first time they heard that. So now you can say, okay, now you're accountable, you should know. Okay, I get it. But then you have Micah. Micah is a contemporary of Isaiah, by the way. And he spoke about 10 years after Isaiah did about the issue. So again, to get the timeline in your head, so you got about 4,500 BC, you get this first prophecy. Then you get a prophecy around 1800 BC about the actual scepter departing from Shiloh and the lawgiver. Genesis 49:10, right? Then you get the other prophecy after the Exodus about the star from Jacob and the scepter rising out of Israel, which is, again, is 1348 BC. Then you get the prophet greater than Moses being mentioned. And then 600 years after that, 740 BC, you get this idea about now more meat on the bones. A virgin, so that means a woman not touched by a man to have this recourse of having this baby in her womb. We know now it's a spiritual birthing. We don't know how it's going to happen. We just know God said it's going to happen. She's going to be a virgin, and a man will not cause this child to come to be, because it's going to be me. Whoa! It's going to be you inside of a woman, not touched by a man, and she's going to be forth the child, which will be you. And not only that, you're going to dominate the entire landscape with your kingdom. Good, and then there'll never be an end to it, like ever. He's like, that's right. And you're going to come from the tribe of root of Jesse, which is in Judah. So you gave us that clue. So that's a big, Isaiah was the first big time prophetic wake-up call at 740-ish BC. But then Micah gets more specific 10 years later, and Micah tells you where. Micah says, hey, by the way, you think that's cool? How about telling me where it happens? So Micah 10 years later goes, by the way, guys, if you think God's getting more specific, what does that mean? We may be getting closer to the reality. Just a thought. Just a thought. You may not have so many generations pass now like there was in the past. There was 14 generations that passed before you heard a bleep from the first time to the second, right? But now we're talking 700 BC. Now there is going to be still, 7 generations passing, granted, but it's not 14 like it was. Not, so long in the distant future. So in Micah chapter 5 in Micah, this is where David was born and anointed king in Bethlehem. It's where Ruth, Boaz, and Saul all lived, by the way. It's where Rachel was buried. So those people later on who would say to the king, to Herod, oh, nothing good in Bethlehem ever happened. Really? You don't think Ruth and Boaz and Saul are kind of important to know that they all lived there? It's not important to know that David was anointed there and born there? Just saying. That's not important to know. It's not important to know that Rachel, you might have heard of her, the one that Jacob loved, one of the 12 tribes, about the 2 kids that Cain he loved the most, that she was buried there. These are key people. These aren't slouches. These aren't throwaways. These are key people that all have relevance. So again, David was born and anointed in Bethlehem. Ruth, Boaz, and Saul lived there. And then you have Rachel, Jacob's wife, was buried there. But he says in Micah verse 2, but as for thee, Bethlehem, the house of Ephrathah, the house of bread, art thou too little to be one of the thousands of Judah? Out of thee one shall come from me, be the chief of Israel. His goings forth have been from the beginning, from the days of an eon. And the King James it says, from old, from everlasting. And the Septuagint it says, from the beginning, from the days of an aeon. Amazing. So now he's telling you where he's going to be from. So now they know for the first time where. So again, put inside your mindset, that's the last thing they hear. Around 730 BC. 728 BC, actually, around that actual. If you do your math and talk about Jesus being born in about 2 BC, excuse me. He's conceived in 1 BC, but he was born in 2 BC. When you have this reality of him being born in 2 BC, and you take the math between 728 BC and 2 BC, then you have over 700 years, right? 730. I find it interesting that God does things the way he does. So first, you have about a 4,000-year gap, and 4 is a number he uses to represent his kingdom, times 1,000, showing 1,000-year reign is intended for his kingdom. Also, not to mention, he mentions there was 4 kingdoms of this world that he would then come after and destroy: the Babylonian, Medes and Persian, Greek, and Roman. What a coincidence, about 4,000 years between the first prophecy and the second one. Then you have about a 500-year prophecy in between, about a 400-year prophecy in between there, which typifies when Israel was in their wilderness wandering, in their Egyptian slavery bondage, and when they became free, showing the blindness again of the kingdom. 400 years of 100 for a generation, Israel would not have their kingdom. And then you have, which is the generation we see of that 1,000-year reign. That should say not, it's more than one generation, but it's the generation God intended, because man was supposed to live 1,000 years. So the intended generation was to be a kingdom of the world, and then we sinned and we didn't live through 1,000 years. But then you have a 600 years later, which is man's number for heirship. And 600 years later, Isaiah's telling Ahaz about how God's going to inherit the whole world and the heavens and everything in it. Oh, I think it's pretty amazing. Then you have 700 years later, roughly, that he's actually born. And of course, 7 is God's complete number, which I think is just fascinating to me, that he's then born. But you still have 7 generations now where there's nothing but not a peep. But there is Hanukkah. There's Hanukkah. That's all that happens. Between Micah's last statement in 728 BC and Hanukkah 165 BC, you got about a 600-year gap there between that and Hanukkah. And Hanukkah's not even in the Bible, but they did experience that, by the way. They did experience that. Jews experienced it. We don't read about it, but they did experience that. So God gave them one little blurb of a light of the world he would provide for them, that he's going to be there for them. Even though the odds are insurmountable against them, he's faithful to deliver and restore, and they can count on him, and it's all about him. Don't worry about the man's armies, and don't worry about everything else tells you. Believe in me. And then 165, 167 years later, he's born in a manger. It's amazing to think about it from a Jewish journey of where they come from. Think about it from your mindset. Be honest with yourself. Could you have heard the writings of Moses in 1348 BC-ish, roughly? Could you have heard those writings about what happened back in 4500 BC and taken it to heart and understood what it said? No. Could you have then built on that what he told you about Genesis 49:10, Numbers 24:17, Deuteronomy 18:1, 15:18? Could you have built on that and said, okay, I get more of a, you're telling me something's going to happen. I don't get the full reality of what this is all about. It just sounds like there's something going to happen. God's going to come. There's going to be an authority issue going on there, and it's going to be a greater type of experience than we had with you, how God exercises authority through you over the Pharaoh. It's going to be kind of like on that scale of demonstrative deliverance. I get it, but I don't know exactly what you're saying. Then Isaiah comes and talks about how he's going to be born of a virgin, and then he talks about also him being this dominant government ruler. And then you have, of course, Micah stating about 10 years later about how he says, oh, by the way, he's going to be born in a manger. In between that and Hanukkah, something else Isaiah writes about, don't forget. It's the two things, by the way. If you're a Jewish person studying the Jewish scriptures, there's 2 books that you're not allowed to read. You can't read Daniel. You're not allowed to, unless the rabbi is with you, because of the prophetic nature of how it talks about Christ. And there's too many questions that could come up. They want to explain it to you along the way. They always want to take anything talking about a suffering servant or a king ruling. They interpolate it to them as a people. So that's Israel that's suffering, not Jesus. That's Israel that's ruling one day, not Jesus. So they always interpolate the individual suffering and ruling into their group as a people suffering and ruling. So they want no individual Jew to ever read the book of Daniel by themselves, ever. Then they also don't want you to read Isaiah 53, which Isaiah wrote after Micah wrote about the manger scene, which means that how confused are you now if you read that? So you just got finished finally putting meat on the bones and giving me the aha moment of him being a baby. You told me he's going to have a government that's never going to end, from the tribe of Judah. Thanks to Micah, your contemporary, your minor prophet, told me he's going to be born in Bethlehem. That's awesome. And now all of a sudden you tell me he's going to get brutally murdered and die? Excuse me? Okay, now I'm lost again. You had me for a second there. I was going, I got it now. You built on it, and I finally got it, and I was all excited. Now you just put a big old pop in my balloon. Now I'm confused all over again. Like, huh? You just said it's going to last forever. What do you mean he's going to die? brutally and murdered. I don't understand. And be healed by his wounds I am? I don't understand what you're talking about. So now you're freaking me out. Now, I don't know what to think. And then for Hanukkah to happen, where they got their Ark of the Covenant was being, I should say, their Holy of Holies was being desecrated, the altar is being a pig sacrifice, statue of Zeus, the abomination, ugh. And they win the insurmountable odds of all these battles, and God has a light shine for the 8 days versus the one it should last for. That's the only bit of God speaking to them in between this last statement he makes about him suffering and dying. Then he gets this faithful message to them that I'm there for you against all odds. Then all of a sudden, silence again. So there's a dead silence between finally getting meat on the bones of what the prophecies mean about being a child, being a government that's going to rule forever, being from the tribe of Judah, being born in Bethlehem. And he ends with, I'm going to suffer murderously by your hand and die for your benefit to heal you. What? Oh, then there's nothing. Nothing. Any more mentioned about the subject. It's dead. It's gone. About that issue. He's done. You're like, what? You leave me like that? Why do you leave me like that? And then all of a sudden in Hanukkah he mentions not in word, but in deed, that he's going to still sustain them and be faithful when all the odds are against them. Okay, that's 600 years later. And even at that, you got 167 years after that where you're actually born. How do you expect me to maintain my sense of excitement or my sense of urgency that you're going to come? I mean, you gave me all these like peaks and valleys. It doesn't make any sense, you know? You see what God does? So God's teaching you by Christmas. If you have peaks and valleys in your emotional situation, I know I do, you have to get through it all and still see the end result as what matters most. Not all the peaks and valleys in between, but see what God's doing through it all. If you don't do that, you will live in the past always and kick yourself or blame yourself, or you'll continue to try to camp out and live there when you have more days ahead of you that are better than those that are behind you. Another way to look to the future is to categorize properly the benefits and blessings of what God has given you, the highs and the lows, and just say, I don't understand it. I don't understand it all. It doesn't make any sense to me how you did what you did. I just know that this does mean this, but this confuses me. And you end with a statement of, you're going to suffer and die for me. After telling me you're going to be a child in a kingdom and you're going to be in Bethlehem, and you end with that? What? Why would you do that? You got me on a high, and then you go, I'm going to suffer and die because of you. What? It just is weird. But God does stuff like that to teach us, don't trust your emotions. Don't trust your thought process. Just believe him. Believe him. That relates to us when he says, yes, there's going to be a tribulation on this earth coming when I have my second coming. Many will apostatize. Many will worship false gods. Many will take the mark of the beast. Many will go, I don't believe in Jesus anymore. Stop worrying yourself over things you can't change. You couldn't change me suffering and dying from you. You couldn't change me allowing you and ordaining you to murderously kill me. You couldn't change that. But you have to accept it. If you want to be blessed by it and be benefited by what comes out of it, you have to accept my will, regardless of how it makes you feel and what it makes you think. Just trust me, he's saying. Trust me to everything I say, not just the good things of what's going to happen, but the bad too. Know that I'm in it all. He's working it all together. So he says to us, he works all things together for good for those that are, basically loving God, which means you have to obey him and love him. Then he works out things together for good for you. But he did this in his own life. In his own prophetic statement about himself, he's saying, I'm going to be a child, endearing and wonderful and beautiful. I'm going to rule the world. I'm going to be born in Bethlehem. I'm going to die. He gave Isaiah the most positive, endearing prophecy, along with the most gruesome one, to one prophet, to show you and us that he's no different and exempt from us. In time, he will also endure his own consequences of his own ordained will on his life, on himself, that he will be subjected to pain and suffering. He'll be subjected to his own ordained principles of how he wanted that to happen unto himself for the betterment of us, for the net result of us. So we have to believe in what he has stated, regardless if it's good or bad to you or me. We have to believe it. And then secondly, we have to look for the benefits and blessings in it. And then thirdly, we can't take out the bad and only acknowledge the good. We have to embrace it all and say it's all of God, and it all is beautiful, and it all is used. It always used to bring about the glorious day that we call Christmas. And that's the reason why, by the way, the world was so dark Because think about it. A light coming into the world to bring light to darkness would by nature have you think to yourself, oh, if light comes in because of darkness, then that means if darkness is supposed to be turned into the light, then it has to pay a price, doesn't it? And that's why he told Isaiah, you got to tell him, I'm going to die too. I'm going to be murderously put to death for you. So I'm going to come as a light, a beautiful little child, but you're going to murder me. You're going to hate me so much because I'm here to bring light to darkness. That's what you guys do in your darkness. You hate me. He says that in the book of John chapter 1. Came into his own received him not. Wonder not that the world hates you. They hated me first, he says. So the light comes in to shed forth on darkness, which by de facto, if you think it through, means eventually for the darkness to be turned into light, the light's got to pay a price. The light's got to make that happen. Darkness won't come to light. Because remember, darkness is not darkness. Darkness is the absence of light. That's a fact. People think darkness is a thing. No, it's not. There's no such thing as darkness. It's the absence of light. So until Christ came into the world, we had the absence of God's presence. Do you understand what happened? That's what he's saying. So when his Shekinah glory left in Ezekiel, the absence of God's presence on the earth caused darkness to fall. And the only time they had a light as a prelude was Hanukkah. That's why it's a big deal, which starts on Tuesday at sundown, by the way. So you have that Hanukkah experience, but then you have God saying to you, it all works together for good. Because without me coming as a light, I can't cast out darkness because it's the absence of me. In order for me to be present in your life, I had to die for you so I can live with you, in you, through you, as my spirit blesses you. So the baby enduring prophecy has to be embraced with the murderous death that I had to live and die. Because if I didn't do that, you'd still be in darkness. You would have seen the light, but not have been changed by the light. Because I would have come and left, and you still have been left in darkness. And I couldn't let that happen. If I come as light, oh, believe me, I'm casting out darkness, Jack. That's what he did. That's why he had to die, to cast out darkness, to be no longer have this world be an absence of light. He is the light. That's what he meant by that. So we're at the end of the time. Yes?
I just think that election in Alabama, it's going to conclude with the eve of Hanukkah.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty interesting. It is. And it's interesting. That's my birthday. It's Hanukkah. So it's pretty cool. Tuesday, yeah, my birthday is Hanukkah.
Happy birthday.
So, oh yeah. So let's close and pray, and we'll have another lesson on next Sunday about the actual story of Christmas, since this was the message leading up to the prophecies of Christmas. I hope it's been enjoyable for you, because I always enjoy talking about it. I always learn myself and recollecting and reflecting on what the Lord has done and is doing still in our lives. So let's pray. So Father, we thank you for this day, the opportunity we have to come together before you. We thank you for being our Savior, our light, who cast out darkness, who originally cast it off from us. Let us not go back and embrace it. Please, Lord, forgive us when we go back and embrace the thoughts and the actions, the words, the things of darkness. When you have shed such a wonderful light of love in our hearts and minds and spirits, with your act of love, coming as a child, ruling over this world one day as you will soon be, even though you're king, you will now exercise kingship very soon. We thank you for your high priestly office to forgive us, cleanse us, sanctify us, reconcile us. Have us be appreciative and grateful. Have us to be filled with the love of embracing all the goods and bads that have happened in between our lives and from when we first know you to now. Let us all just be in a place of overwhelming joy and compassion and love because of what you've given to us. You used everything to work together for good in your own life as you do in ours. So we thank you and praise you for this Christmas season. Keep us together safely. For those who are traveling, keep them safely, Father. And we ask that you would help us to continue to look for the next message of your Christmas story. And it is your story. It's his story, your story about you. We thank you, Father, in Jesus, Yeshua's name. Amen. And that's it.